On Capitol Hill, there is a big push for Republican lawmakers to deliver on a bill that President Trump calls, and you've heard him say it, one big, beautiful bill. So to get that bill through, and for the bill to pay for Donald Trump's policy promises, Republicans need every vote. And at this hour, here's your headline. They've got a potential problem on their hands. Some GOP members are holdouts. They're not making it easy, and they are right there on your screen. Speaker Mike Johnson spent most of his day and night in meetings trying to sway them in favor of that bill. Think about it this way. A single no from one or more of the people on your screen could tank the bill, especially if Democrats unite in a big way against the so-called big, beautiful bill. So Congressman Pete Aguilar of California with this message to his Republican colleagues moments ago. Listen.
Some of our friends on the other side of the aisle will say, this is just a procedural step. Please don't hold this vote against me. Here's the truth. This vote doesn't just open the door for Medicaid cuts. It guarantees them. Republicans are hiding because they're terrified of voting against Trump's endorsed budget. But their constituents are banging down their doors and demanding answers on why they care more about reducing costs for billionaires instead of working families. Our challenge to House Republicans is after you pass this budget today, which cuts Medicaid by $880 billion, go home and have a town hall with your constituents. See how they feel about what you just did. If you're going to rip away health care from people, then you ought to be able to defend your vote directly to them. But that would require the House Republican Conference growing a spine.
So there is some strategy there and a warning. Let's go now to CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns. Okay, so Caitlin, is it Medicaid that is why some of these Republican holdouts are sort of holding their nose there?
Hey, Reed, good to see you. Well, if you've been wondering where Congress is as the president issues executive order after executive order, well, today is the day to tune in because they have long argued that passing a budget with the president's priorities, paying for them, border security, tax cuts, other items, that this is where they're exercising their power. However, they can't get the votes together yet to be able to pass this. Now, you ask about the potential Medicaid cuts. It's important to note that in this specific bill, there isn't a line item to cut Medicaid, but there is an item to make heavy cuts to government spending. And a lot of lawmakers have pointed out that really the only way to achieve those cuts is to make some changes to Medicaid and the spending on Medicaid. So that's kind of where that item is coming from. Now, I asked Speaker Johnson specifically about this earlier today. I said, can you rule out unequivocally that you won't touch Medicaid eventually? Here's what he said.
Let me clarify what we're talking about with Medicaid. Medicaid is hugely problematic because it has a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse. Everybody knows that. We all know it intuitively. No one in here would disagree. We had a hearing in budget just last week, or week before last, and they asked the experts, and the estimate is, I think it's $50 billion a year in fraud alone in Medicaid. Those are precious taxpayer dollars. Everybody is committed to preserving Medicare benefits for those who desperately need it and deserve it and qualify for it. What we're talking about is rooted.
So he's saying there, look, we don't want to necessarily touch Medicaid as the program. We want to get these savings by rooting out fraud, waste, and abuse within the program. But the amount of cuts that they are talking about require some pretty heavy cuts across the board. So stay tuned for that and kind of lay the marker down there. You have had some moderate Republicans up here on Capitol Hill whose districts rely on Medicaid and who have raised concerns about this. Now, over the course of the past 24 hours, several of them have said that they've talked to Johnson and they've been convinced or assuaged by that argument that you just heard him make. But you have another group of holdouts, Reed, who don't like this bill as it stands because they don't think it cuts government enough and it doesn't make the Trump tax cuts permanent, which is something that they want to see. So, as you mentioned, very little margin for error here. And the reason that this all matters is because this is the chance for Congress to show that it can do its work. And if they can't cobble the votes together for the president's top priorities, there is a big question about what they can achieve legislatively. And then that puts the spotlight back on the executive branch and whether they will do or try to do more that way if they can't get Congress to move pass through some of their big priorities.
Well, and I'm thinking about what we just heard from that congressman from the state of California. I think it's revelatory because it kind of shows an opening, a strategy opening for Democrats in that message saying, okay, go ahead and pass this, go back and hold town halls, talk to your constituents and see what happens. It seems like they're wanting to capitalize on that. And in fact, I want to show our viewers this is a tense exchange between Congressman Rich McCormick and those voters on the budget bill's ramifications. Let's listen to that.
The town hall was more about DOGE and the concerns about executive privilege. This discussion is going to be about the budget. I'm a budget hawk. I'm very much a fiscal conservative. I would like to see us be more aggressive on spending cuts so we can save things like Social Security, save things like Medicare, Medicaid. I think if we're irresponsible in the way that we look at things, we don't cut out the waste, fraud, and abuse, if we're not responsible with this massive amount of debt that we have, the massive amount of deficit spending that we really accelerated during the COVID era, that we've never gotten back to normal spending era, we will corrupt this nation and our economy because the currency standard that we are for the rest of the world will go away. And that will affect our children and our grandchildren. That's irresponsible.
So they're wanting to keep the conversation on DOGE and rooting out waste, but it seems like in those town halls, people are wanting to know a little bit more about the bottom line of Medicaid.
That's right, and that's why we're keeping an eye on some Republicans in those districts that do rely on Medicaid or have a significant portion of their constituency who is concerned about Medicaid cuts. And the reason that Rich McCormick is interesting there, Reed, you may remember last week he held a town hall. Now, he is a very conservative Republican congressman who represents a very conservative area outside of Atlanta. And we saw lots of really pointed questions about the pace at which DOGE is cutting the government and what they are exactly doing. Now, the Republicans today have argued that Democrats have been hijacking those, in their words, those town halls. They don't believe that this is really an organic movement from Republicans. We do know that one of the organizers of that town hall in particular was a liberal voter. But what is interesting here is that you have Republican leadership up here on Capitol Hill that is willing and ready to give a lot of deference to the president, to Elon Musk, to make these cuts. Speaker Johnson said today, cuts to government. Speaker Johnson said today that there's just so much that Congress hasn't been able to do in terms of shrinking the size of government that Elon Musk is able to do. So even though a lot of these cuts could be affecting Republican districts or states, we've heard from some Republicans concerned about particular cuts to NIH funding, for example, to national parks. You're really seeing this clash of wanting to cut government spending, but also, and the size and scope of government, but also, concerned about your own interests in your state or district. But by and large, the message, at least from Republican leadership up here this week, has been that what DOGE is doing is okay because it's shrinking the size of government, and they're, raising their hands a little bit on some particular programs, hoping that they'll get a second look.
Well, on this broadcast, doing what we do, we often say that this is a national broadcast, but all stories are local stories. Apply that same thought to what's going on in Washington, D.C., and really all national policies end up being local policies that people have to either live with or put their foot in the door over. Caitlin Huey-Burns, fascinating to watch everything going on. We appreciate you so much.